I am the true vine, and my Father is the garden. He cuts off every branch in me and then bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such as branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remained in his love. I have told you that this is my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I have learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other. If the world hates you, keep in mind that I hated me first, or that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As is you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That's why the world hates you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jaden. We talked about this passage a couple weeks ago, and I taught on. It's such a cool, thick passage that it's almost like its own series by itself, really. And I taught on some of the aspects that are in it, and then I had hinted to you that I was going to pick back up on it and teach on some different aspects of what Jesus is talking about here. Because again, he grabs this one image and just runs with it on this beautiful grand scale. And we're going to be learning a little bit more about that in our discussion here on being still. So we started a new series last week on being still, and I first want to open with asking you this question. Okay, so you may be familiar with the term keeping up with the Joneses, but do you know where it first came from? Do you know? You've heard the term, oh, keeping up with the Joneses. I did not know this. I Googled, where did keeping up with the Joneses come from? Like, who are the Joneses? Who are these people? And apparently it was the name of a comic from back in 1913. Did anybody know that it was from a comic? I did not know. I'm like, wow, this comic's older than my grandma, because she was born in 1919. So I'm like, this is crazy. So then I start Googling and reading all of these Keeping Up with the Joneses comics. And the whole setup of this comic was that there is a couple, and their neighbor are the Joneses. And the wife is constantly telling her husband, like, oh my goodness, the Joneses, they just did this. It's that whole grass is greener on the other side concept. And she's always telling her husband, like, oh my goodness, they buy their eggs at this grocery store. We should start buying our eggs at this grocery store. And then he goes to the grocery store and he's all upset at the price of eggs, which is really funny because it was 1913 and they were upset with the price of eggs. Some things don't change. but like, so I just started going down this rabbit hole of reading all of these Keeping Up with the Joneses comics, and then I was just like, oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to work on my sermon. But I did just go down that, just read all these old comics. But not right now. Don't Google it right now. You're in church. Come on, people. But anyways, but it really is this whole thing about, like, you could say, well, is it competition? To compete with the Joneses. Sometimes it's not just competing. This was just about trying to keep up. And so what the artist, and you can read up about him too, he was like trying to portray and help people understand that it would be ridiculous for us to always be caught up in comparison with others and trying to keep up with them, trying to stay, head to head, nose to nose with them the whole route, or even trying to pass them to some capacity, because you know what? There's just no joy in that, right? And there's no variety. And the thing is, we're letting someone we become stuck on set the new standard. And when that becomes the case, we're going to lose a heck of a lot of peace and joy, and we're going to gain anxiety and all these other crazy things if we have the keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And what's wild is it's really hard to not have that when we're just working so hard to keep up. You can grab that next slide. And so what we're doing in our series right now is we're learning and focusing on this concept to be still and know that I'm God. And to really be still and know He's God, it means that you're not trying to keep up with someone else, right? And I don't know all of the things that happened in your week, but how many ways were you trying to keep up? Trying to keep up. And some of you may say, well, I'm not trying to keep up with someone else. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. Okay, well, it goes for that too, right? Because being still, what we're discovering is this other word, and this word is Rapha. Go ahead and grab that next slide. Rapha, and we see this word Rapha, and it was translated to the word still, and nowhere else in the entire Word of God is Rapha translated to be the word still. It does not happen anywhere else. It's the one place. And when you look at how Rapha is loaded, this word is loaded. It is used repeatedly, but for different translated in different ways. When we understand how this word is used and loaded, it will help us understand what this stillness is that we are called to have. And this stillness means that you have to hang limp and just sink down, give up, and be feeble. It means that this word acknowledges that you are feeling discouraged, alone, that you are feeling abandoned, weak, and have lost courage, and are at a point of exhaustion. Like there's an acknowledgement. Sometimes it feels good to just let that be acknowledged. We work so hard for it to not be acknowledged. You really don't want the Joneses to point it out, right? Whoever it is you're trying to keep up with. But isn't it just such a relief to be able to acknowledge that you're exhausted and that it's okay to be that? You can grab that next slide. And also that it's this part where you start to feel like you failed and you're giving up and you're going to give up some slack, you're letting go, you're going to be withdrawn, which is different than being abandoned, right? Abandoned is not within your power, but withdrawn, you choose to withdraw, so it could be either one. Yet to show your lack before you leave. And it's this idea of like, you know what? I'm going to just show that I have failed. I'm vulnerable. Here's my lack. I'm out of here, and that you are now disarmed, vulnerable. But also, this is cool. The word also can mean, and then you wait. And then you wait. And some of you might say, dude, I've been waiting a really long time for a lot of different things, right? I don't know if you have a room in your house and there's just all of these timers on the wall, and they all have little labels, and they're not clocks with time zones, but they're timers and all of the things that you are waiting on and are like, come on, Lord, come through for that. And we know His timing is perfect, and some things are not a no, it's just a not yet, but some things are a no, and we need to let it go and not be waiting for it. But we just know that there's been this constant need to keep up. And so Rapha means that we get to finally just go limp and be vulnerable and say, I can't. And he says, be still. He's actually commanding you to do this. He's commanding you to just stop for a second. And it doesn't mean that you have to physically stop and keep up with your schedules. And we're talking about that today as we look at the vine. But he's just letting you know, like, I want you to just go ahead and be like, all right, I feel defeated and I failed. That's it. Do it. And in that, know I'm God. And you can trust that. And that's coming too. We're going to be talking more about that. So how do we experience Rapa? We're going to just always keep talking about that. Today, we're going to talk about a different, unique way in which we experience Rapa. You can flip the next slide there. And that Rapa is related to another word. You just, like, you have your Hebrew word, and then you have your vowels that are all the fun little, they're dashes or little tiny T's or dots on the bottom. And if you close some of those, you can change the whole word. And so our next word is Rapha. So Rapha can easily be flipped to Rapha, which means that the Lord heals. And this is what's beautiful and for us to remember is that when Rapha first shows up, it shows up when Israel is in the desert and they're looking for water. And when they find water, it's bitter. And they're like, we can't even drink this. And God makes it sweet. And they call him Rapha, the Lord who heals. And they were not asking for physical healing at the moment. They were asking for healing of their spirits because they were discouraged. They were questioning if they were abandoned because for 3 days they didn't have water. They were withdrawn. They were like running out into this desert away from Egypt. They were experiencing all of Rapha. And then God shows up as Rapha. How cool is that? You can flip the next slide there. He heals, but he heals what? Like, what is he looking to heal? And so today we're looking at that. We're going into seeing what he might heal today. Sometimes the healing of our physical ailments, but it could be that. But he's looking to heal our spirit as well. So in Rapha, we're focusing on today about that feeling to give up, to offer up control, or feeling that you've failed. We're gonna look at those ones today more specifically as we look at these branches from John chapter 15. So in that scripture today, there was talk of a branch. You can flip that next slide there, and you each got a fabulous little sheet of paper for me in your pew, right? And you can put it this direction if you like. But here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Grab a pen in the pews. Hopefully they all still actually write. Sometimes they're dried up. I'm going to go through and check some of those pens. But draw a branch. Sketch a branch out at the moment. And you do not have to be a fabulous artist. We're not going to hang them up for everyone to see. You can share them with people if you like, okay? But sketch out a branch, okay? And a branch, you got that whole limb and then all the branches and then all the little twigs that come off. And I'm going to say that as we go in this time together, you can continue to add to it and add to it and add to it. Yes, you could have a little artistic assignment today. So right now, take a moment to make a sketch of your branch. And I want you to start thinking about all of your little organized, like little shoots, the little branches coming off of the main branch, okay? And I want you to think about if you were to kind of categorize or organize your life, what are the different branches that you have in your life? Like, maybe you have very specific things that you volunteer with, or there are certain activities you're involved in. Maybe one whole branch comes out and it's your family. Maybe a branch comes out and it's a specific group of friends, like maybe you have like one group that you do lunches with and another group that you go out for coffee with. And, if you were to look at your life and kind of make all the little schedules, little branches, start to make those and kind of and put a little label on them. And that could also be, you could even have a branch for your sports schedule. You could have a branch for your health concerns. or even like hobbies or obsessions you're super, super excited about, right? And then what comes off that branch, all the cute little tiny branches that pop off of it, I want you to write down what your specific responsibilities or activities are towards that. So an example would be like if one branch, let's say you're one of the serving hands team members, you could be like, okay, this one is serving hands. And then when you're popping up on the little branches, it could be like, I'm always making sure that I pre-make a side before I show up, you know. I try and make sure some of the grocery shopping is done, you know. I get there to help do the setup, or I get there later to do the cleanup, or you know what I mean? Like all of the things that you're involved in. It's one thing to say, I'm in Girl Scouts, right? And then also, though, it's like Girl Scout could be a branch coming off, but all the little branch pieces coming off are your personal little contribution to making Girl Scouts great, right? What do you do in those things? And so that's what we're looking at. And you might even be like, well, this little tiny twig coming off this branch has 5 more little prongs coming off of it. Cool, draw that, you know. If it's family, sometimes you might be like, okay, this is family. Here's a branch coming off the family. This is like maybe a specific family member that I spend most of my time with. And then all of those little parts that come off of that are all of the different ways that you help take care of that family member, or the fun things you do with that family member, all the quality times, all of the little things that you do. I see people looking at each other. That's very cute. So then you start to write all of those little things. And so hopefully this branch doesn't feel overwhelming, but for many of you, it probably will start to become something that's hopefully not, but it'll start to feel maybe a little daunting. Okay. So you can continue to sketch away on that. So now let's consider for a minute the fruit that you bear. Okay. The fruit that you bear. So what branches would you feel are bearing fruit? And that the question for that to kind of evaluate is, how does your life affect the lives of others that it brings blessing to their lives, fruit into their lives? So think about that for a second. You can say, you know what, I always make sure I do this thing, and I know there's fruit there. So even when I'm discouraged, I still make sure I do this because it's so worth it. There's purpose and point behind it because it really makes something great for someone else, you know, and there's fruit there. And I know there's fruit there. It makes a difference for them. And then what are what in your life bears personal fruit for you? Is it fulfilling in some incredible sense? So I did talk about maybe you have a hobby, right? So if I were to, if I was to make a branch that was like walking and hiking, I'm going to confess I'm terrible at that. I used to be so disciplined and good at like making sure I walked every single day and try to score a hike on some weekend, because it was like, this is part of my Jesus time, and I just hit a walk and I'm like just talking to Jesus the whole time. And by the time I get back, I feel really good, you know, even though nothing got really solved, but I feel like I kind of got solved. Like Jesus confronted me on what was actually coming out of my mouth, but through my mind. You know what I mean? And he was revealing to me my attitude the whole time I was walking, and I realized I needed to have some attitude change and to see someone I'm in conflict with the way he sees that person. You know, maybe it's yoga for you. Maybe that's the branch. And so there is fruit. It doesn't necessarily affect everyone else out there, but it affects me. Like there's fruit for me because a little part of my spirit got addressed and healed and cared for, and I come back from the walk feeling like I can finish the day out, you know, kind of a thing. I really need to get back to, to walking. I think also part of it for me is being outside physically, even if it's raining, like I need to be out there. So I want you to, when you're looking at where's the fruit, is there something in this activity that nourishes your soul? I could say painting does a lot of that for me too. But is there fruit that this activity, has fruit because it really makes other people's lives beautiful and it's very worth doing. So 2 types of fruit there. So, and now we get to look at your lovely branches and start discussing pruning. Pruning, oh my goodness, yes. Okay, so here's the pruning process. Okay, so it's removing areas of your life or activities, your branches, you are striving in that are making you tired and hindering other fruit from growing within you, fruit of the Spirit, and with you, how you're blessing others. So basically, pruning and selecting what needs to get cut from your life or is whatever is, it's either not bearing fruit or it's actually hindering another branch of yours from bearing fruit, right? Other parts are not bearing fruit. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that part, it's that something else is robbing that. It's taking nutrients. You can grab that next one because it's a sucker. All right. What is a sucker? When you're pruning, right? So when you're pruning and there's a tree and a tree branch, sometimes there's these other little offshoots that shoot off and they're taking in the nutrients and energy from the plant. And what it's doing is it's stopping the other branches, your better branches, from actually producing something. And so sometimes we have that. We've overloaded our schedules, we've overloaded our lives, and we've got suckers. And we've got to snip the suckers. And so we're going to look at what that pruning process looks like, right? Because Jesus is like, you cannot bear any fruit without me. You can't bear fruit without me. And sometimes you've had at it and you're like, Jesus, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for you to come through with this over here. And Jesus is like, I'd love to come through over there. But you keep welcoming these suckers. Let's talk about what I have called you to, and let's talk about what I haven't called you to. There are so many things I get wrapped up in, and later on I'm exhausted. And I'm like, what's going on? And it's because I'm getting caught up in things that I'm not called to. Okay? And this is the hard part. They could still be good things. It's just not your thing. It's just not your thing. And that's so hard sometimes for us to step back and see. And so sometimes there's things that, boy, it gets a lot of our attention and a lot of our time, and it doesn't bear any fruit, not real fruit. It's not really making you better, and it's really not making anyone else better. And that sucker is an absolute sucker. Like, it is stopping other things that matter from really growing and becoming something great. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just not a thing that produces anything. That needs to get lobbed off sometimes. And the reason why I have you guys think about limbs and then all the little activities, maybe sometimes you just snip off a little piece. Maybe it's a little piece that comes off that you can say, that's off my plate, So let's consider the quality of the fruit we are bearing. And so let's grab there we go. Thank you. Our main question here is, how do you identify what in your life needs to be pruned? And then what has developed into becoming a sucker in your life? So this is the thing, is something might not really be a sucker. It is something God's called you to, but it's developed into a sucker, right? It's draining your spirit versus filling it. But the thing itself is still good. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. So that term, keeping up with the Joneses, is perhaps where we need to start. So what if everything you do to keep up with others or compete with others, you just cut out of your life. So think about that for a moment, okay? So right now, look at your branches, okay? And maybe you have like a social media branch, or maybe off the branches, you can put a twig off of it that says social media because you like to talk on social media about that thing. You know what I mean? And it gets to have a little part. I want you to get detailed on that. But right now, look at that and tell me how many things, well, you don't have to tell me, like, it's yours. Keep it to yourself. It's all good. We can talk after. How many of those things, that when you really think about it, you're trying to keep up with the Joneses? Like when you look at that, you're like, I'm only doing that because I feel like I have to satisfy this in culture. Like culturally, I'm supposed to stay on top of all of these things. And if that wasn't expected of me, I probably wouldn't even care. Now look at that list for a second. How many things, and just maybe put a little mark. Like this little mark is kind of a Jones for me. Like I'm only doing it because I'm trying to keep up. Go ahead and mark that. Go ahead and mark that. And it's not to villainize it, but to be aware of it. I don't know how many little things, like I try to always make sure my driveway is in good shape because I don't want to be the person in the neighborhood who doesn't have like a driveway that's not, trimmed up. My backyard's awful. Don't I just have to keep the front yard looking nice though? That's what people see, right? Well, what is that? Keeping up with the Joneses. Let my front yard look like my backyard right now. I'm busy. I have other things to do right now. And if it bothers somebody else, then it's bothering them. I'll get to it. But I'm letting it bother me. Why? Because I'm keeping up with the Joneses. So on whose vine do you branch from? Think about this. Jesus says that he's the vine and you're the branches. He is the vine, you're the branches. And we are going to talk about being grafted into Jesus. That's another beautiful term he uses, that we get grafted into him. And then we also graft these branches in. The reality is we might have for us be like, I'm not even grafted into Jesus. When I look at this, I'm not grafted into Jesus. I am honestly grafted into the Joneses. I'm grafted in to trying to keep up with what my family expects of me, what different friend groups expect of me, all of these different things. Maybe you're not grafted in to Jesus. Maybe the world of comparison and keeping up has become an overwhelming and very potent force in your life. And at some point, you wandered away from Jesus and got grafted into a different vine. Or you started allowing the Joneses to graft into your branch. All of these competing things are grafting into your branch. And so who are your Joneses? And what are you trying to keep up with? And so here's some examples, like social or societal standards, right? What are the standards in society that you are trying to keep up with? Family, you are trying to please. Do you have some family that you're like, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, they're going to flip out. If I don't do X, Y, and Z, they won't talk to me for a month. If I don't do X, Y, and Z, they will. Dude, write that down. Write that down. Write it down, right? Because you're trying to keep up for someone else's standard. Jobs you're trying to please. Friends you're trying to please. Like you probably have very colorful friends and they all have a different little set of standards. And you know how to love each of them to the best of your ability in ways that also helps keep the peace, right? And then also your frenemies you're trying to compete with, right? We all know what a frenemy is. They're like that one person in the group that is not really your friend, but your enemy, but you're like kind of surfacey friends. And maybe they are the great Jones of your life. I don't know. But those things can become standards. And then what is your platform for keeping up with the Joneses? Okay, so there's the Joneses, and then there's the platform to keep up with them. It's the part where people know what you're up to. Okay, so it's about keeping up those appearances. And so it could be whatever is your favorite social media site. There's different types of social media sites, and everyone's posting about how lovely their lives are and what they're up to. And you look at that and go, my life should be full of adventure and romance and all of these things. I'm going to try and keep up with that. Look at these people's beautiful and glamorous lives. Everything's so lovely and perfect. I guess my life is supposed to be. That's very Joneses-ish. I feel like this comic needs to come into our century and have a second round, right? I mean, back in 1913, the gal was just looking at the neighbor and then telling her husband, we got to keep up, we got to keep up. Now you don't look at the neighbor, you can just look at your phone and see what everyone else is doing. Where did this standard start to come from? It could be family gatherings. We're going into fall. It's going to be time for Thanksgiving. Y'all are going to sit around the table and everyone's going to talk about what they're thankful for and what's going on in their lives. And maybe there's that one family member that you're always trying to keep up with. You're always trying to keep up with them. And the platform for you isn't social media. The platform is family gatherings. You want to make sure you got something to say that's awesome when you get there, Maybe your platform is it's our class reunions, It's time for another class reunion. Brad, don't you have a class reunion coming up? Oh, not quite. Oh, but you talked about your class reunions because they're every 5. Nice. And so it's a chance to try to catch up. And so some class reunions, sometimes everyone's just trying to compete and set the standard, and others it's like no one's competing at all and they're just so excited to see each other. And if you didn't talk back in high school, you talk now, kind of a thing. It's so anti-Joneses type environment. I don't know what kind of class reunion you might have, but some people live to show up to their class reunion and brag. For some people, that platform is like staff meetings. Staff meeting is going to come again this week, and everyone in the staff meeting is going to talk and report on how they're doing in their department. And you want to make sure that when it's your turn to report on your department, you're keeping up with everyone else in their departments. And you're just really keeping tabs all week on what everybody else is up to so that you're prepared. That staff meeting is your platform. And then there's always social lunches. Maybe you've got groups that you get together with monthly or weekly. And it's either just like a really, really great time. It's kind of like our McMiniman gatherings where you're just chatting about life and it's just great and you're there for each other. Or you might have social lunches that you get together and you're like, I got to make sure I'm buying my eggs at the same grocery store as the Joneses. You know what I mean? And it's stressful. And you're trying to meet and stay standards because you don't want to be the person who gets ixnayed out of the lunch next month, or next week, But there are different platforms, and sometimes we don't realize it. We've never stepped back and really looked at this. Take a moment to step back and really look at this, right? If you could look at how you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, we need to start to examine those things in our lives that are sucking our energy, time, and resources just to check a box, keep up appearances, and make us feel like we're making it by everyone else's standards. Are you grafted into Jesus's vine or the Joneses' vine? Or could you be grafted into Jesus's vine, but you keep letting the Jones vines graft in? What are specific things in our lives that are sucking our time, energy, and resources? Have you ever quit something and then felt an incredible sense of relief? Have you ever quit something and then felt an incredible sense of relief, and you didn't realize you'd be so relieved until after you quit it? Have you ever had that? It's amazing, honestly. Like you quit something and then you're like, I never realized what a weight that was until I finally let it go, right? And people sometimes will walk away from like Um, Different things that it's just kind of you fell into a rut and everyone is always expecting you. One of them can be very easily sports, right? Kids will quit one sport and be like, I am just only going to do, like, I'm not going to do 3 sports anymore. I'm going to quit one, you know? And then this beautiful transformation you see happens in that kid that second. You know, it happens pretty darn quick. Like, they quit something. And all of a sudden, it's like this, like, stress was gone. And even though there was good things coming out of it, the fruit was not real, true quality in their spirit and who they were. Because as soon as that was gone, they could breathe again. You know, it was really sucking things from them. And now all of a sudden they have the time and the relief for other things. And it's wild because they've been set free, you know. And so we see that maybe there's a club or an activity somebody quits. And once they quit that thing, all of a sudden, their life looks a little differently. They can stand up a little straighter because all this weight has gone off. So the thing is, how did some of those things that, though they weren't bad, they turned into suckers? They weren't helping them. They were weighing them down, right? So we need to see that as well. Many people who have quit things have turned around and said that at some point they now realize that activity stopped giving them joy. It stopped giving them joy. And honestly, you know what? We see that a lot with like childhood athletes who become like well-known, and they're like, you know, they make it to the Olympics, and then all of a sudden we wonder whatever happened to that little ice skater or gymnast or this or that, and they're isn't it weird when they're like in their 20s and they retired from their professional sport? I always think that's interesting. But they realize like, well, I started ice skating when I was a child and it gave me all of this joy, but then it turned into my job. And when it turned into my job and I had to do it, and I was having to keep up with all these Joneses and please all these people, this was no longer satisfying, and it became the worst thing. So when I finally retired from it or quit it and walked away, I got my life back, right? And it's not that ice skating or gymnastics is bad. It's that it turned into something that wasn't giving them life. It was taking life away from them because it turned into something that was now having all these Joneses grafted in. And so here's this hard thing, is what might make it hard for you and scary even to drop something is that you actually have a sense of identity in it. That is the scariest part. Identity ends up. Can you grab that next slide? This was a slide that I thought was interesting, but it's a pruning one, but it's showing you how, like, you know, there should be one true, like one actual vine. I put Jesus in there in red, right? But you'll have ones that will start to branch out. You'll have your main vine, but all of a sudden, there's these other limbs that try to become really prominent. And I put in red up there, if you can see it, it says Joneses. And that's what happens is you'd be like, no, I'm grafted into Jesus and I love him. And my life I really am trying to follow him. But that A, B, and C up there that you see are all of these Joneses that we are letting try to push and compete. And then if you just get in there, and you don't have to lob that whole sucker off, but you start being wise about what you take off of it, it no longer becomes the dominant sucking vine that's coming off, the main one, right? So this is the thing. Sometimes you can't lob the branch off, but there's different parts of it you can lob off so it doesn't have this power in your life. And a big one is a sense of identity. Right now, think about it for a second. What things in your life do you identify as? Think about that. That if you lost that, you kind of feel like you lost a piece of yourself. We have those things, and we take pride in those things, and then we become afraid of losing those things, right? We start to become afraid, and we're not called to live in fear. And so we miss out on what we were meant to be known for and known as in him. So maybe the first place to begin to snip is the platform of your sucker. So it could be that you're like, this is a good thing, but I'm realizing that I'm losing joy in it. I'm starting to have more anxiety. I am trying to keep up with the Joneses on this thing. Maybe you keep it, but you just stop posting about it on your social media. I'm just using social media as an example because it's an easy example for me. But you're like, I don't know, let's say you're really, 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 really into horses, okay? Fine, be really, really, really into horses. Just stop posting about horses on Facebook. That's just a random example, by the way. Not aiming it at anybody. If I am, dude, that's Jesus. If that's you, right? But just stop posting about horses. Just lob off that piece and just see how that goes. Because if you stop trying to be known for the horses, the little piece of you can still love the horses, but they're not necessarily part of your identity. Nobody knows you by this anymore. Some people might even be like, are they still riding horses? What are they up to? Just lob that piece off. Snip that off and just start to see what that does for you. Just stop posting about something you're starting to identify yourself with. Because this is the thing, pride has nowhere to go when there's nowhere to brag, right? Pride has nowhere to go when there's nowhere to brag. So where do you display what you're keeping up with the Joneses? Snip this. Let the Joneses be the Joneses. Don't compete. Don't talk about where you are buying your eggs, you know? And so perhaps you might find yourself later realizing that actually it'd be easier at this point, now that it's not this sense of identity and trying to compete or compare or keep up with, you might just be like, you know what? Why am I even into horses in the I was only into horses because this person was into the horses and I was like trying to keep up with them. At this point, I might as well just get over horses. I'm more of a dog person. Cool, do that. Just, you know what I mean? But you wouldn't have gotten there if the power of the Joneses was what you really snipped. Snip that. You know, take it off. Jesus is calling you back. Right? Jesus is calling you back to come and be with him. So, yeah, that's kind of scary. You might lose a sense of identity in it. But your identity is not supposed to be in them. And so maybe your thing is you're like, you know what? No, I'm just going to cut that whole platform. You know, maybe this is hard, but maybe there's a group of friends that you're like, I just can't be lunching with them every week anymore because no matter what, that's the platform where I feel like I gotta perform. We get there, we sit around the table, we order our appetizers and start talking. And I'm gonna start trying to not talk about horses. But if I can't not talk about horses, maybe I just need to not show up for a while. You know, maybe that is actually the buffet or the feast of the Joneses that you got to step away from. Okay, so we need to look at what it really means to be grafted into Jesus. And so this is in Romans 11. Let's grab that. It says, if some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap of the olive tree, do not consider yourselves to be superior to those other branches. If you do consider this, you do not support the root, but the root supports you. Okay? I love this because like Paul's trying to lay out for everybody about how Jesus is this true vine. He's grabbing onto this Romans 15 thing, right? And then he does talk about how there's branches lobbed off, right? Paul goes to the Jews, and many of the Jews have rejected him. So then he goes off to the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are like, "Ooh, Jesus, yes, give me more." And so they're being grafted into Jesus's true vine. And he's trying to make sure that the Gentiles understand, like, dude, you're not better than the Jews, and the Jews are better than you. They may have been originally part of this tree, and you've been grafted in. None of you are better than the others. There's no Joneses off the vine of Jesus. There's no Joneses. And it is not that you're supporting Jesus Jesus is supporting you, right? And so he's the one who's calling you to do these things, and he's not calling for you to compare, compete with the others. He's not calling that for you. And I love that. So here's the next question. So what if you can't cut the sucker? Like, you can say, here's this branch, right? And it's family. Let's say it's family. And you have all your little offshoots. And maybe there's specific people and all the little things that you do with them. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to stop posting and talking about this or whatever. And there's little things you can lob off, but you can't lob the whole thing off. You can't. Okay, how are you supposed to prune that? Because in the end, when you sit down, it's still sucking the life out of you. You know what I mean? Like, it is still taking a toll on you. There's no fruit coming off of that. What if you can't cut the sucker? If it's not something you can quit, and it really is something Jesus is calling you to. Okay, I know it's like when Jesus calls me to something and I'm like, really, Jesus? Because this is sucking the life out of me. I want to quit this. And he's like, nope, your faith goes through trials, right? So maybe this is really faith going through trials for you. Okay, so if you can't prune it, here's what you can do. You can prune why you're doing it. You can prune why. Still do it, but prune why you're doing it. You can prune the why and keep that activity in place where you're caring for people and loving people, but you can prune why. So sometimes we do things, important things, and even extra things because, you can grab that next slide, because we feel guilty and we aren't good enough. How many things do you do for people and they are lovely and they're good and they bear fruit and Jesus is calling you to do it and you're like, but it's sucking the life out of me. And if I don't do it, I'll feel guilty. And like, I'm not good enough as a mother, father, daughter, friend. I'm not going to, whatever your job is, I'm not going to feel good enough. And I'm going to feel guilty. Now look at that. How many of all those things, mark it, how many of those things are you doing because you'd feel guilty if you did it? You feel guilty if you don't do it. You're like, I can't cut that off. I feel so guilty if I don't do it. I can't cut that off. But you know what? What if God is like, cool, but prune your guilt? Lob the guilt off, okay? And you might go, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, look at, you have a Jesus who's like, I didn't call you to live a life where you just felt guilty and you felt guilted into doing everything. So do it. But we're going to do it with some joy, okay? We're going to do that with some joy instead. You can prune the why. So now when you look over your branch, and God is saying, yes, do this. What branches, you can grab that next one, what branches do you do so you have control or you have a sense of control? Look at that list. So sometimes we look at things and we're kind of like anxious and we're like, I don't really know if Jesus has this. I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, Jesus, do you really have this? I don't even know if I can trust you with this. I do these 8 things so that I feel like I have a sense of control. And I'm only doing it, my why. The only reason I'm doing it is so that I feel like I'm in control. Maybe control over a situation or control over other people. But all the stuff you're doing is just so that you feel like you're in control. And God's like, prune it, prune it. You shouldn't be doing things so you feel like you get to be in control because you know what's happening there. You're not trusting me with it. Prune that. Prune that. Maybe look at your list now and be like, what are all the things that I'm doing? Because I'm not trusting Jesus with that. And I've never really sat down and given that to him. And it's been wearing on me, and I didn't really stop to realize that. When you look at the fruit that's going off of that, maybe the fruit is not of its best quality at that point. So then you have that next one. What branches do you do because you're afraid you would otherwise be a failure if you didn't? Right? How many of those things are you like, oh my goodness, I would be a failure if I didn't do this. And I'm afraid of becoming a failure in the end. I failed, these friends, I failed this family, I failed this project, I failed this, all the ways where you're worried, like, I don't want to fail. I do it so I don't feel like I'm failing. Is this the life that Jesus called you to? He might have called you to these really wonderful things, but not for those reasons. And we have a God who's called us to be completely set free. And so those are those ones that I want you to really, like in this week, take to Him and say, God, I want to do this not out of guilt, but I want to do it out of joy. And I want to do this not because I have to be in control. And if you want me to give this up, because I am doing this for a sense of control, but it does serve other people. So if you want me to do this to just honestly serve other people, may I trust that you are in control? You guys, that's when Rapha shows up, the healer, right? It's time for you to just go limp and give up and Rapha that. Let's pick specific things that we are going to be still and know that He is God and let Him have. Those ones are even harder than the lobbing off branches. It's the branches that you can't lob off. But you got to prune the why you do it, right? Because in the end, you can grab that. Because in the end, the fruit that you really produce is guilt, control, and fear of being a failure. Maybe you look at that branch now and you're like, you know what that is? I do this for this reason and it just produces more guilt. I do this for a reason that just produces more control or fear of failing. Like, that's not the fruit that God is calling you to be bearing. So you can grab that next slide. So remember, there's two types of fruit. There's a fruit we produce that is a result of the way we care and live. It produces incredible results in the growth of other people. So you're like, this produces great fruit. I see how it loves all these people. It's great. But then there's the subfruit. And the subfruit, you're looking at it like, but I do it because I feel guilty and I need to be in control and I'm afraid of feeling like a failure. So this branch is complicated because you're complicated to some degree, right? So meanwhile, you're producing this beautiful fruit and your family and your friends are all like having great experiences because of you, but you are living in fruit that's just going bad for you, right? So there's two types of fruit. The other fruit is that fruit of the Spirit piece, right? There's a fruit that's being produced in you, and a character that God is like, I've called you to this, so you can produce a beautiful thing, but have the beautiful things happening within you too. And that's what we're called to. Rather than producing the guilt, control, and fear of being a failure, right? God is saying for us to be full of joy. You get to do this. How cool. What a great day. Sometimes I'm in a bad mood and I get up and I get in my car and I'm like trying to pep talk myself while I'm talking to Jesus. And in that, it's more like you're just trying to meditate on what you know to be true, even though you feel the opposite, right? Because you're in a really bad mood. And you're like, today I get to clean out our utilities room. Today I get to, climb up on the scaffolding again and try and reach weird, awkward spots where I think I could fall. Today I get to, you know what I mean? And like when you go into it with that and you flip on some worship music, pretty soon you're doing it for joy. And as you're going, you start to find a measure of peace, but you have to intentionally just stop and be like, Jesus, I'm giving this to you. I'm not going to walk around oblivious. I'm going to call it and give it to you. So whatever that might look for you, you can grab that next slide. Whatever it looks like for you to be still, right? Let the Joneses walk and race around and do their thing. Can you just be still? You can grab the last slide there. Rapha is when you give up keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, it reformatted. It's supposed to fit right in there. I don't know why it doesn't format the same. Anyways, we'll have to figure that out. But Rapha is when we feel like we have failed and it feels like we need to offer up control and we need to just let go of certain things, prune it and let it go, give it up. That's the Rapha. Rapha is when we give it up and we give up trying to keep up with the Joneses. So what are those things that you're doing just to keep up with the Joneses? Cut those suckers off. What are the things that God is calling you to? And you're not doing it to keep up with the Joneses, but you feel like it's weighing you down. It's producing good things for others, but within you right now, it's just hard. Prune the why and ask Him to fill that. Let's pray. Lord, we live in a country that gets faster and faster paced. And Lord, we also live in a country now that we will have multiple Joneses in our lives. And God, you're not in that. Father, may we start to see that you've called us to walk with you and to walk alongside each other to help us all just grow closer and closer to you. And so, Lord, may we stop trying to produce things apart from you. Lord, may we start to see all of these even more finer pointed areas that you are asking us to let go of and to give to you and to learn to just stop and be really still before you. And so, God, may we give you those things today. May we give you those things throughout the week. May we walk this week fully aware and open to your Spirit, pointing all of these things out to us. And God, all of those things that are actually scary for us to give to you because we have placed a sense of identity in those things, Lord, may you warm us up to being able to cut that off completely. Lord, may our identity only be found in you because, Lord, you are enough. May we trust that. And so, Father, we give you this week. May we trust you in it as well. We love you in your Son's precious name. Amen. Let's rise for the last song.